Let's see when we're live. We're live, Spitz. This is it. We're back. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Professional Novice. I'm Ali A. Rizvi. Today I'm continuing my series on dads. I've been doing for a little while. Just a little bit of before we get into it, I just want to talk about something. Please do take a second to hit the subscribe button below and like the stream if you're watching it on YouTube. Professional Novice will now be a regular podcast with weekly episodes. In case you missed it, last week I spoke with Kelly Carlin, who's the daughter of the legendary comedian George Carlin, about everything from comedy to cancel culture to Jungian depth psychology to, so on. In the near future, I'll be speaking with Dr. Brian Earp. He's the associate director of the program in ethics and health policy at Yale University. I'll be talking about his book called Love Drugs, which is about drugs like MDMA and other psychedelic drugs that can help people.
Two great tastes that taste great together.
Yeah, I know. That can help people enhance their relationship, and they get other drugs that actually help them sever emotional connections. So, is that something that can happen? It'll be fascinating. And of course, if you missed the first part of this series on single dads, the link to my conversation about tips for divorced dads with the wonderful Elena Locker-Torres from Together Family Wellness is in the description below. So again, please hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, and give us a rating if you're listening to us on your podcast app. And now I'm going to move. And
feel free and comment as we engage in conversation.
Right. If you're here, to go ahead and type in your questions, and we'll see if we can take some questions later on. Just tag Professional Novice, and I'll be able to see it better. Today I've got Spitz back here. And Spitz is just one of my regular guests and one of my friends, and we just like talking about things, and this podcast is an excuse basically to hang out. But in this case, it is actually very relevant. So Spitz, you've been a single dad for a while. I mean, let me see, what I had here is that for the last decade, I think for long stretches of time, you've been pretty much 100% single dad. In my case, I'm, as of recently, sort of like a 70% single dad. So we're doing like, we're doing this thing, and it's really interesting. Like I'm having a lot of fun with it, but I don't find any resources about it. Places where you get stuck, like they're just, for single moms, there's a whole bunch of, so I was looking for a nanny and went on a Facebook group with thousands of people, and it's called Moms and Nannies. I didn't say it like as if, dads will never look for nannies. And I understand why that is, but it's just to show that it's not something that you see very often. But
yeah, at my kids' middle school, I would be the dad among all the moms. So at the playground, at the soccer field. So I'm used to playing that role too. I'm the dude, with all the moms and all the chatter and gossip. And so I was kind of an honorary mom among the mix.
So I want to start by saying, and I know we've talked about this before. I'm going to start by sort of giving a shout out to the single moms, because even though there aren't many resources for us, the bar for single dads is a little low as well, because I've noticed that if I play with my kid and throw her up in the air and make her laugh for about a minute, everyone around me, including the single moms, be like, "Oh, look, he's such a great dad." But a lot of single moms, they'll feed and clothe and shelter and take care of their kids full time, and they're just like, "Oh, well, that's what they're supposed to do." So
I could second that. I'll post something on Facebook. My kid got an A in school. He accomplished this and that, and I get a cascade. Mostly women are like, "You're such a great dad. Go for it, Spitz." And I'm certain a lot of the single moms working 2 jobs, rearing their kids are like, "Fuck this guy." So, again, there's an inherent bias in terms of what that bar is. And if, a dad exudes any emotion to a child, then there's a round of applause when, most of the women are doing all the heavy lifting and, absorbing most of the burden. So,
man,
so I'm glad you bring that up to kind of level set that the standards are different, and it also works in both directions. So we've got a positive bias in that ways, and we've got a way negative bias in others, which we can also
which we're going to get into. And I just wanted to say one more thing that I thought was funny is that when my ex would be away and I was taking care of my daughter back when we were married, I would there'd be women come and say, "Oh, so you're babysitting your daughter today?" And I'd be like, "Babysitting? I'm babysitting my own kid." Like they'd use the word babysitting. Like I'm the father. I'm not babysitting my own kid. Like kid's with me. But anyway, there is.
And I had a similar experience too, planning a birthday party, right? So if I'm the single dad planning a birthday party, I had a swarm of moms rushing to my assistance. I guess, some people are born great and some people have ineptitude thrust upon them. And in the parenting role, I guess I'm the token, incompetent male. But, doing my best. But there's also that sense that you need all the help you can get. Are you sure you got this? And I'm standing there with balloons and, peanut butter. And I think we're okay. No one's died at the birthday party. So, mission accomplished. That's true. See?
So let's start with this. You have two boys that you've been pretty much for the last 10 years, you've been like largely or almost exclusively a single dad to them, right? Just go through your story, start at how you grew up, because I think you have a very very relevant, very pertinent story to this, and how did it end up this way for you?
Well, let's see. Long story longer, as they say. I had something of an accidental shotgun pregnancy and marriage, which led to the creation of our first child, Vincent. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to 2002. So I found myself 37 years old, going from a single guy living the big life to married with a kid pretty much within the stretch of about a year. So the marriage was kind of not laid on the best foundation. It was a little bit rocky. And we had our second kid because, of course, if things aren't really working out, you definitely want to double down. We had our second kid, Nicholas, in 2006. And we more or less kept it together for about a decade. And after that period of time, it culminated and was probably inevitable from the beginning with a divorce. And within about 6 months or a year after the divorce, their mom decided to head back to their native Korea. So thus my adventure begins as single dad. So that gives a little bit of context, circumstantially.
How old were your kids at this time?
Let's see. So the younger one, I think, was about 7, and the older one was 10 or 11 when this went down. All right. So I found myself pretty much a single dad. I did have a girlfriend at the time, and she was supportive, provided a lot of assistance in terms of logistics, in terms of planning, and the role of stepmom was, in a sense, thrust upon her. That created its own complexities in terms of our dynamic as a romantic couple. And, one thing led to another in that direction as well. But the difficulties and the challenges presented themselves almost immediately in terms of really just having the full responsibility emotionally and practically, and really trying to figure out how to handle this, given the fact that mom left, given the fact that the two kids were under tremendous stress and duress, obviously losing contact with their mom, and then trying to fit this dynamic into the romantic relationship at the time, and really moving forward in terms of what would be best for the children. So that gives a little bit of context in terms of the circumstance and what I felt that I had to do in order to really keep the best interests of my children in mind every step of the way.
So when it started, I mean, it must have been so. Yeah, I would assume you were probably pretty anxious. I mean, did you know what to do and how to go about it? What was the transition like? What were some of the challenges?
Yeah, I think the essential sensibility that I had when this all went down was to continue my relationship with my boys as it had been in the past. My parents, to give context, because we often either repeat the patterns that we've seen or try to flip them in almost diametric opposition. We either mimic our parents or become anything but our parents. My parents were both Holocaust survivors. My father, I liken him to Robert Duvall in The Great Santini, the drill sergeant, and my mom was something like Gilbert Grape's mom in that movie. So on the one hand, I had the drill sergeant. On the other, I had a fairly dysfunctional, mentally ill mother. And the context that kind of engendered with regard to my kids encouraged me to be the opposite. So rather than become the disciplinarian, I've always felt myself to be my kid's buddy and support mechanism, someone that they could talk to, someone that I could be open with, someone that I could just share whatever came to mind. And when the mother role, in a sense, was thrust upon me too, I tried my best to fill that, but I honestly don't think I was able to do it. So, in all fairness, the single dad is a dad. And when it comes to some of the responsibilities that a mom would have, whether it's logistics, planning, all of that, I did have a tremendous amount of assistance from my girlfriend at the time. But emotionally, I think that vacuum was always there for my children. And I did my best to fill it, but I don't think that was possible. And in retrospect, I don't think I could have or should have done anything different, but that's a handicap, I think, that as single dads we have when a mother is either absent partially or entirely. And that's, something that we can talk about. And I'm curious how you deal with that void as well. But I've been hard pressed to fill it. And I see the impact on my kids in terms of their development. And I do my best to fill in the blanks, as it were, for them emotionally. But I don't think it can be complete. I think that we can and should do our best. But, our children need their mom.
Yeah, they do.
And, in contrast, I mean, we've got alternative parenting, gay parents, either two women or two men. I think that role can and is fulfilled emotionally in contexts like that. But there's really only so much that a single parent can do, either male or female. And something else that we can address and talk about is, are there any innate differences between how men and women raise children?
Yeah.
I don't know. And as a man raising a child, I don't know. Were my hands tied due to who I am and what I could do? Or is it dropping the ball as a parent? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I have. So one of the you asked me what I did in my case. Like my child is a lot younger. I mean, she's 5 years old. So I actually went with something that you told me. Because for me, the impact of her, the family breaking up and all that, it was just I was very disoriented. I didn't know how we'd kind of go about it. But I think you told me one thing that I still sort of remember almost on a daily basis. Is you said that kids emulate, they mirror you. Yes. So if you act confused and if you act like you don't know what's going on, then they're going to be confused and they're going to feel insecure. But if you take control, you're solid, you're like, okay, I got this, I know what I'm doing, then they're going to feel like everything's okay. So even if it's, it's not that the family's breaking up, it's the family's just changing shape. So, a kid does need their mom. And in our case, like we make sure that, my daughter does have a relationship, with her mother makes sure of it. I mean, it's a very important thing. Even if she does spend more time with me, but I think that's the important part, sort of keeping it together, even if you don't totally have it together. Right?
Yeah. I agree. I agree completely. And that was really my tack. That was part of my approach to being the fun dad and an extension of my behavior with them before. And I think that's exactly right, which is if you show panic and fear and uncertainty, then kids pick up on that. And if you show a certain level of stoicism and resilience, then the kids feel more assured. They feel more secure.
Yeah.
They realize that the situation is fairly chaotic, but children need an emotional anchor. They
Right.
need at least one individual in their life who is continuously with them, loves them, and supports them. And if you could provide that umbilical cord, in a sense, from them to the world and back again, then I think that's the essential task and the essential responsibility that we have as parents. We can make a million decisions, we can guide them, we could try to teach them, but ultimately it's providing that foundation of love and security. And if you could at least do that as a baseline and create that foundation, then I think the kids should be all right, and you should be all right as a parent. And I've kind of used that as a guidepost at every step. So trying to
Mhm.
trust my intuition, trying to stay cool, and in a sense keeping a lot of my own emotions, my own frustration, even my own anger bottled up, if you will. I didn't want to project it onto them. A lot of parents, I think, either voluntarily or involuntarily make the mistake of getting their kids involved in their own drama, their
Yeah.
drama with the ex, their drama with their career. Their kids become an emotional extension of their own insecurities. And I think this is a horrible mistake. I think the ultimate responsibility is to shield your children from your own bullshit, your own insecurities, your own fears, and basically deal with it as an adult, deal with that yourself, and focus on your children when you're with your children in terms of what your children need and not what you need, especially if it's in a kind of compensatory way. Like, you don't
Yeah.
want to burden your children with that kind of stuff. And I've tried to practice that, and that's helped.
Well, it takes practice and it takes a lot of sort of conscious awareness and insight into the fact that you're doing that. You have to put in the effort because depending on the circumstances, usually the kind of circumstances you have with the separation or the divorce, I mean, there's probably a lot going on that you have to push down. You're right. You do have to bottle it up and you have to push it down because a lot of times that will come out. And navigating your relationship with your ex is actually really important too. I mean, when Elena was here for the first part of this, and she said something, she said, every punch you throw at your ex lands on your child.
Yeah,
And yeah,
100%.
it's
It's got to be firewalled off. And
yeah,
there's a temptation often to get the children swept in the drama between the parents, and that's never ever a good thing. But
yeah,
there's a weird flip side I've noticed, though, too, to the sense of stoicism and resilience. And it's a little bit paradoxical and it's somewhat frustrating for me because I've tried to be that strong guy and that role model of stability and security and love. But a whiplash effect of that too is ironically a breach of trust sometimes. I'm so strong willed and I keep my shit so much together that the secondary effect of that is not showing the vulnerability that my kids need to empathize with me and sometimes open up to me.
mhm.
So one thing that I've discovered, and this might be a consequence of the single dad, where, as men, American males, Canadian males, right? Western males, we're taught pretty much from birth to be tough guys, right? You
Oh yeah,
take it,
I don't
you
even think
take
I don't.
it, you kick ass, right?
Yeah,
And when you have to kiss ass, you do, but we're gonna get through this.
mhm,
And if I've blown it, and in retrospect, I've done my best, but if I could rewind the clock a little bit, one thing that I've discovered with my kids, because of that almost ingrained machismo, that like, we're gonna get through this, we're gonna succeed, don't let it get to you. Both my kids have had an enormous amount of trouble opening up to me. I'm fun dad, I'm nice dad, but they're much more comfortable talking to their mom, even when she's absent. And I oftentimes have heard about crises and difficulties in my own children from other moms at school. Your kids, flipping out here a little bit, or, a neighbor or a friend of a friend. And in ways that puts me off a little bit, where here I am trying to do my best in terms of staying open, showing as much love and affection, being that fun, interactive dad. At the same time, both kids have had a very tough time, I think, fessing up to some of their challenges and opening up. And
Yeah.
conversely, although their mom has been mostly absent, when she does show up, and even when she was out of the country, my kids were much more comfortable communicating with her.
Hmm. Yeah. I want to ask you about. So you just talked about your history with your dad, and my dad kind of similar. I mean, our dads weren't really very emotionally
Right.
expressive. They weren't very good with vulnerability or express. Well, they're vulnerable as hell. They weren't very good at expressing it or talking about it. So that's not something that kids learn by example. Both of us are men, right? So we didn't. It's just like men learning emotionality from men. I mean, that's just not something that happened with us. And now we're in positions where, our we do have to form that emotional connection. So this comes down to these sort of gender preferences. Now, I'll tell you that, like with my daughter. I mean, she'll come to me with all kinds of things. She's 5, she's younger too, but when she's hurt or when she's crying, and she always asks, always, for her mom. Like that still happens. So there's a so how do you deal with that? Like, I mean, so what you're talking about, it's I guess it's a hard thing to. It's actually a very honest thing to say, but it's very true. How do you uh have you tried? How did you try to compensate for that? Like, just sort of balance that machismo and the I've got my shit together and we're gonna have fun and doing that, and then also seeing how you could, as a male parent of 2 male children, trying to foster that sort of emotional connection. Is it possible? I mean,
Oh,
you can't do it all, but
it's tough. I mean, down to the cellular level,
yeah.
every single cell is powered by their mom's mitochondria, right? So, yeah, it's disconcerting. Sometimes it's frustrating, but what I conscientiously try not to do is to take it personally and be reactive to it.
Right.
So on the one hand, I feel, look, I've been there for you guys. Mom is adios. The stepmom coming in or going out has had its own complexities and difficulties. And if there's been any continuous individual who's been there for you from the beginning, covering your back, paying your way, that's
Mhm.
daddy-o. And here you are, you can't even open up to me. You can't have a conversation. And the second you have a problem, you're on the phone with mom, who's been mostly absent. So viscerally, that hurts. But practically, I need to let that shit go. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of instances where men and even women in my shoes get jealous, get reactive. And it's been my fundamental operating principle as single dad to put my kids' interests first. So I shelve it. I block that stuff. I keep that stuff away from my kids, and then I internalize it and deal with it. And then I ask myself, how can I improve as a parent? The point you brought up earlier, that vulnerability isn't necessarily a salient characteristic of the Western male, right?
Mhm. Well,
So
actually, of any
I
male. It's
then
not just a
any
Western
male.
male.
That's true. That's true, and
Yeah.
it might even be more extreme in other cultures too. But you know, on the one hand, we're taught that machismo. On the other, we acknowledge that increasing our vulnerability and therefore our sensitivity could bring us closer to our children. So I try to take the negative, which is that visceral eruption of frustration and even jealousy, and turn that inward to ask myself, what can and I should do better to really make a meaningful connection with my kids? What about
Mhm.
my behavior is precluding them from opening up as they would to their mom? But essentially, and to your point earlier, I think that there's a boundary to it. I would be so bold in this super PC identity politic laden age of ours to just come right and say there's no substitute for a mom. I mean,
Yeah.
a mom gets to the core of a human being emotionally and even physically. And I know many adults who struggle with their parents. You know, they'll have narcissistic mothers, they'll have highly destructive mothers, but that bond can't be broken.
It can't.
And adults go through so much struggle just trying to reconcile their feelings, some of the painful backstory and trauma with their parents, but at the end of the day, you just can't get over it. Your parents are the most significant influences in your life, and that's incontrovertible. And I would argue, again, at the expense of, you know, laying down any a priori fundamental here, is that mom, you know, mom is it. And dads, whether it's, you know, a consequence of our culture or something that's innately programmed into us, is, you know, the guy who goes out and hunts the bison, brings it back, and lights the fire in the cave.
Yeah.
You know, we do our best.
Yeah. So I have a question here from Gaten Farshi. She's saying, what about therapy with your kids? So is that something this is another thing, like, and I brought this up in the first part, like the previous episode I did on this, is that, you know, men don't even like asking for directions. I mean, that's a classic stereotype.
Totally.
It's like, we're not going to stop and ask. Yeah. Should I call the plumber? No, I'm going to fucking do this myself.
No. Give me that map. I know where we're going.
Yeah.
As the car spins in circles, you know. Well,
this is, we are dating ourselves. This is old school, because now we have GPS and everything. But you know, this idea of, you know, having this, sometimes when you do need help, and you're admitting it, you're talking about how, you know, there are certain places that you just couldn't fill that void. So have you ever thought about or gone to therapy with your kids whenever you hit any of those sort of struggle spots?
Yeah, absolutely. And this came, not surprisingly, from my girlfriend at the time, who said, your kids need therapy. And I was the guy, right? They're going to be all right. We're going to slug through this. And eventually, you know, we went along with the idea. The oldest had maybe 6 months of therapy when he was middle school to high school, and it was beneficial. He got a lot out of it. If it would have been up to me in the long to-do list of parenting, it likely wouldn't have bubbled up to the surface. And, you know, again, the encouragement of my partner at the time was to get the kid in counseling, and several months of it was beneficial. My younger one actually recently had some big issues with anxiety and depression.
I saw that.
A combination of the lockdown, a combination of some alienation from his middle school friends, and even biology. He was entering adolescence. He had something of an emotional breakdown around the same time that I did, towards sophomore year of high school. So all of this was a perfect storm that got me to finally say, you know, hey, this kid needs help. So we got him a good therapist. He's had some sessions throughout the end of this summer. And now that school's reactivated, he's back on a normal sleep pattern, and he's out there in the world, albeit masked. He's still in live school in New York, and that's got him back into the world. And he's, I think, ready to pull the ripcord on therapy. I think he's kind of like his dad, like, I got this. Yeah. So I'll let him decide. I'll let him see how it goes. But that's a great question, which is, you know, if I'm acknowledging the inherent limitations of what a dude can do as a dad, then what kind of supplementary resources could and should this deficient human of a parent, you know, provide his children? And I would think therapy and counseling, you know, get them on the sports teams and, you know, shoo the kids out into life is and should be at the top of that list. But it's with the caveat that we're dudes. We got this. We don't need any help. Thank you very much. Great idea. What's for dinner? Let's order a pizza.
Yeah.
So,
It's Abdullah Samir saying it's harder with older kids. Have you noticed that? Is it is it harder with older kids? Like, how much does age make? I mean, your kids were what, 10 and 7, you
yeah.
said?
Yeah. It's harder and more difficult. So I think the devastating emotional trauma of losing their mom at that age, weren't quite sure when and if she would come back, was severe. And I did my best to prop them up and cheer them up. I threw them into summer camp. We moved, try to disrupt it and try to fill that void best I could. That had its own unique set of problems at a very vulnerable age. As they got older, to the great question, there were a different set of issues that came up. Kind of, trying to identify with my partner at the time. There were conflicts involved with that too. Kind of the substitute mom, the usual stepmom kind of allergies that kids have. There was a unique dynamic that went on, and that had its own complexities. But as kids age, and especially when they enter adolescence, it's a transition, obviously, from childhood and complete helplessness, in a sense, and complete dependence on children, to its exact opposite. Because the hallmark of adolescence is essentially hating your parents and wanting to leave the cave, right? So from a Darwinian point of view, we are designed to breed and die. So get out of the cave, find a mate, create the next generation, and please expire. So adolescence actually is the prime of life, based upon a social Darwinian look at how we've evolved and where we've come from, right? Go back only a few tens of thousands of years, no civilization. We're running around in bands of about 100, 120 people. You're age 15, 16, you're sexually mature, and you're essentially an adult. So a lot of the erratic, crazy behavior I think we see from adolescence is actually a Darwinian programming to get them the hell out, get them to fornicate and create the next generation and expire.
Yes.
So we're seeing that, we're dealing with that, but obviously in our civilized society, adolescence is the beginning and not the end. So long answer to a short question. There's a whole different set of problems for kids with single dads as they enter their teen years. And in this sense, there's a bit of an advantage. I would say advantage, at least from my point of view, to being the single dad, being the fun dad, being the buddy dad. And this, again, might have some biases related to the gender of my kids because they're boys. So we've had a frat house. My friends and family joke that when they come over, there's stacks of pizza cartons. We've lived in an apartment for 2 years and it looks like we just moved in. There's nothing hanging on the walls. There's shit all over the place. There's video game cartridges and consoles all over the place, and underwear on the radiator. So that created a sense of comfort for my boys too, and a sense of security, almost a sense of defiance. So for better or for worse, their dad is kind of a teenager too. And
so it was like a little club. Like
yes,
you had your own little boys club.
relish the opportunity to immerse ourselves in our own bullshit. And this had a very, very powerful therapeutic quality too, because I might have atrophied their emotional development to kind of mimic my own. But at the same time, we had such a sense of security and happiness. And although their mom wasn't really present, it got to the point where she essentially wasn't missed because we were having a good time. We related to each other, and the day-to-day quotidian, the zeitgeist of living with the kids was so pleasant. It was devoid of conflict. It was full of grab-assing and bullshitting. And that sense of comfort, that sense of security made them feel that all's right with the world. And like I say, I do want to caveat that by saying that there's a price to be paid for that. Neither one of my kids are now first violinists with the New York Philharmonic. I've been the opposite of helicopter parents. Laissez-faire, here's $20, go get a pizza. They're pre-pandemic, they're jet setting all over New York.
So hold that thought for a second, because I wanted to. This was a follow. So, continue with this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you finish. I'm
going on and on. So just,
but I gotta. So the question I was gonna ask is that when you're doing this, you've got this. Let's say your house is a man cave. When you have this situation happening, which is great. I mean, you're right. That does provide a sense of secure. It's like us against the world. Yes, we have our thing. Maybe a little bit different, but this is who we are. That kind of acceptance of it that does provide a sense of belonging and security. But so then you're talking about the laissez-faire, the hands-off parenting. How do you, when you're the buddy and you're the friend and you're the teenager, what do you do about the discipline thing? Because you do need to also be dad at times, or do you?
Yeah, the analogy,
especially in the absence of mom.
Yeah, 100%. I use the analogy. I call myself kind of the Jedi Knight parent. So everyone's seen Star Wars, right? Remember the scene where Luke and Obi-Wan are in the bar, the cantina scene, and everyone's partying and everyone's having a good time. And then the alien bad guy duo start to threaten Luke Skywalker, and it culminates in a quick physical confrontation. So within a nanosecond, Obi-Wan takes out the lightsaber, chop, chop, chop. There's limbs flying. The fight is over. The smoke clears within seconds, and everyone instantly turns back to their drink, back to partying like it never happened. So that's my analogy for discipline with my boys. So we're having a great time. We're laughing. Something happens which demands, even from this laissez-faire, fun, incompetent dad, a reaction. There's a safety consideration. There's a school issue. There's something which is really unacceptable, even by my lax standard. And then it's passive aggressive, I'll admit to that, but I think it's effective in the sense that it allows a quick flip. And my kids have been responsive to that. Fun dad turns into lightsaber wielding Jedi Knight, which is definitively, if this can't get course corrected immediately, all right, limbs are going to fly. And then they back off. I do a couple, Jedi moves, and then a lightsaber goes back in the hilt, and then we go back to partying. So I think that's the best analogy I do. That, and many better parents will notice, is in stark contrast to what usually would be considered better or typical parenting, where there's a kind of, a common denominator of seriousness, control, calm. And I've had difficulty doing that because of my personality. So it goes from fun to lightsaber back to fun fairly
Sharia
quickly.
law.
And Sharia law. And I don't, I think it's been effective for us. I think that the price that's paid for it is, my kids might not have realized their full potential in unexplored areas because I haven't pushed them. And this used to be really a significant bone of contention with the ex and with various other moms that I interact with, where they see how I do what I do and they see potential in my children. And their interpretation is that it's untapped because I don't push them hard enough. I'm too fun with my kids. We're having too good a time. And my view on that, though, is I see in contrast other kids who are programmed up the ass, right? They go from the soccer game to the piano lesson to the dance recital to the karate, to the singing lessons, back to the piano recital, and every moment of their kid life is programmed,
regimented,
and maybe there's a MacArthur Grant winner there that's going to happen, right? And the mom is bringing that out, but more often than not, I see kids losing their childhood because their parents are projecting their own insecurities
Securities.
on their own kids and wanting to create super kids to make themselves feel better.
Right.
So does that sound like a rationalization from a lazy, laissez-faire, fun dad? Probably, but I think there's an element of truth to
No.
it.
I think there's more to it. And this is
Yeah.
actually, this is great. You're getting ahead of me. This is actually what I
Mhm.
want. I actually have a rant about this I want to do.
Yeah.
But before that, I want to, there's Michelle Spitz has,
Michelle, all right.
yeah, Spitz. You guys know
Mhm.
there's a relationship. I don't know if you guys are related, but
Yeah.
no,
Uh-oh, the womanizer.
yeah.
I'm totally innocent.
Okay, so so Michelle
Yeah.
is saying interesting.
Mm.
She's saying my mom died when I was 6, and my brother and I were raised with a fun, single, laissez-faire dad who was also a serial womanizer. I don't know. She says it very neutrally. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
she means that in a good way or a bad way.
Yeah.
Just serial. I mean, probably. I mean, I would assume. I guess for us, you can have good serial womanizers, but the this is also your mom also, I think, passed when you were younger, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. My mom actually committed suicide when I was
no,
25.
that's right.
So that's kind of harsh. So there's trauma in the family that we can go through too. And
Yeah.
to address Michelle's observation, I think a difficulty that my kids have had is my post-marriage dating, because there have been other women who have come into their lives to a greater or lesser extent.
And then left. Yeah.
One very significantly for a very deep and meaningful 8+ year relationship. And my kids almost spent as much time with her or seeing her in my life as their own mom. And then when that relationship, didn't work, other dating, other women. I have someone very important in my life right now. My kids have met her. This adds complexity. So, from Michelle's point of view, I'm sure, being a kid, seeing this, you've got fun single dad, every once in a while Jedi Knighting some discipline, and then a revolving door of mommies. And that could be very confusing. And I've talked to my kids about that, and it's difficult. It adds a layer of complexity, a layer of insecurity. And the question is always there. Well, is she coming or going?
Yeah.
What's our role vis-a-vis this other person? And if there's conflict with that person, then that adds yet another dimension. And from the kid's point of view, that person can never be mom.
Yeah, they can't.
So they're at a disadvantage right out the door. And then it becomes a real issue of setting boundaries. Is this stepmom? Is she taking on a role of disciplinarian and co-parent? Or is she an awesome chick that dad is dating? Don't worry, kids. She's not gonna, start acting in that role and making any demands of you. We're gonna have dinner and go to the amusement park and ride roller coasters and have a fun day, and that's it.
So that's interesting. So it's
Yeah.
so you have, I guess I'm trying to zoom out and look at it from a bird's eye view. Like so you have two boys and they're growing up, and you've always been there. You're the rock who's always been there. But then they have mom who was there and then left, and then they had stepmom, your girlfriend at the time who was there for a long time, and then
Yeah, and in a
that left
in a
too.
significant way,
So
but that didn't make it. So that's
so
another sense of loss and confusion.
well, it's
And
again, it's another sort of breakup of pretty much a family in a way, right? I mean, you go through it again,
absolutely,
right?
very very traumatic,
That's
very
what you mean by the
traumatic.
other layer,
Right,
right?
right.
So
So there's
yeah.
additional single. I'm glad Michelle brought that up, because single dads do things,
Mhm.
and if dating and dad's own sexuality and dad's own need for connection and love, takes place, which it does, that reverberates again through the children.
Mhm.
So
I mean, that's not
it
just a
has
dad thing, though.
benefits. It has benefits. The kids, interact with new people. It becomes almost communal in the sense of sharing responsibilities and interacting with different people. But once again, there's this archetype of security, going back however far. There's mom, and then there's dad. And
Yeah.
if mom leaves, the bedrock of their emotional system is shattered. And then you got this dude trying to take on that role. He's doing his best, and then dudes will do what dudes do and then bring new mommies. And then
Yeah.
the kid's like, really? Okay, let's
Yeah.
give it a shot. But they're going to be naturally resistant most of the time. And it could get very, very difficult and
Yeah.
unpleasant for everybody. And that's part of the tragedy of it.
Yeah, quick follow up from Michelle. She's saying he
Mm.
basically taught me not to get close with any of his girlfriends because they wouldn't be around for long. The only girlfriend I really disliked was the one he ended up marrying after dating her for decades and openly cheating on her. This is like I
Yeah.
actually know somebody with a similar story like this.
Yeah.
But I have to say, you said that this is something that dudes do. This is something that happens with the single moms too. I mean, you
I
hear about the
understand. Right.
revolving
Right.
door. It's just,
Yeah.
and that's, I guess, another place where there's a double standard in a way that, when single moms do that, it's, they're just judged a lot more than I think when dads are. So that's another aspect of this. So I wanted to kind of get back, and we'll get back to this. What do you do in terms of preserving your own individuality and your personal life and dating and all that stuff? But I wanted to get back to what you were saying about kids having regimented programs, and the parents like over scheduling everything for their kids. So blonde infidel saying, hi, by the way.
Mhm.
I know her. Unscheduled free play is very important for children's well-being. And this is something that I want to talk about too, because when I was younger, and this, okay, so you do a lot of creative things. I mean, you're also you've got a really sort of successful professional career. You're a guitar player. You're a writer. I mean, you do things that are creative. We're very similar in that way because we do the same things. Like I do music. I'm also
Yeah.
a writer, and then I have the similar kind of professional thing that you do. And the reason that I was able to do it and I had that creativity is I spent fucking hours in my room alone, like without iPhones and iPads or karate class or whatever. I actually had a lot of time. Like my parents did leave me alone in my room, and that's the time when I got bored. When I got bored, that's when I learned to do things with myself. I mean, well, not that. I know what you mean. That I that I started enjoying, where I started enjoying my own company. Right. And one of the things that I do with my daughters, I did this very early, is just let her get bored. And for the first few days, she'll just be a problem. She'll be really annoyed. Why can't I do this? Why can't I have she wants to watch something or whatever. But if you let her get bored, and pretty soon she would start doing her own thing. She'd start taking anything, turning it into characters, doing role play. She can spend hours on her own on a Saturday morning while I sleep in.
Yeah.
And she's 5.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, I know many adults who can't do that. They can't spend time on their own. They
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
nuts.
I confer completely. I mean, I was an only child with 2 completely dysfunctional, toxic parents. And I was in my room, me, myself, and I created entire worlds in my head
Yeah.
and my imagination, my play with myself, by myself, is really fundamental to how I look at the world. And some of the greatest joy that I get from the world is me time,
Yes.
creative time. It's making something from nothing because I was in a loveless, very toxic environment, and I had to create my own universes.
Mhm.
And doing that gave me a sense of purpose and resilience and self-reliance that is a bedrock for who I am. It's some of my best qualities are what were created in a toxic environment where I was forced to be independent and make my own world. So I completely can. However, there's a wrench in the works for today's generation.
Yes.
And
Tell me
you
about the
see it
wrench.
coming. It's video games. So video games, for better or for worse, most people say worse, are addictive, all-consuming experiences that have shattered this sense of boredom, alone time, and personal development. So guilty as charged, laissez-faire dad, for letting my kids run loose with these games. Part of it is jealousy. I deliberately did not let myself learn the controllers because I knew that if I would do so, I would lose my job, become an incel, and basically depart from life. So I shielded myself from this because the technology is amazing. I grew up with Pong, right? You had the two dials and the things would go. And I thought that blew my mind when I was 12 years old.
Like the Atari Space Invaders.
The Atari Space Invaders. You know, we used to, you know, in high school, we used to, you know, do drugs and go to the game room.
That's the thing.
Machine, Space Invaders and Missile Command.
Based on TV and cocaine.
Yeah, TV and like LSD and video games and the big things. But the technology, the immersive technology, where the cinema-like qualities, and with you get into vehicles, you're in completely emulated environments of pitch point realism. It's, you know, we're one step from the Matrix, man. We're ready to get plugged in. You know, my girlfriend and I were at a VR game room just the other week, and they have a plank that you walk on suspended above a city. So you're walking on a ledge, and you put the VR headset on, and it's so realistic that I couldn't even make it to the end. I was terrified. I was like Neo in the Matrix. The shit is real and it's coming, so it's only going to get worse. But the point I'm trying to make, though, is the bad consequence of my laissez-faire dadism is I let them run loose. The positive consequence of it is at least that they were distracted. It got their motor skills refined. And interesting enough, my younger kid, Nikki, whom I live with now, the older one is now in college, just packed up his video games and said, "Dad, I'm over it. I need to get a life." So this illustrates your point, Ali, which is like, do you force your kids to grow up? When you have a mental construct of what's in their best interest as human beings, and as their benefactor, as their guardian, as their parent, you know the right thing to do. Do you force that upon them? Do you make them do what you know is good for them? Or do you let them indulge themselves, fail, pull their pants back up, and learn from their own mistakes? And this is the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity of parenting: when to speak up and when to remain silent, when to be active and when to be passive,
so
when to be prescriptive and when to shut the fuck up and let your kids discover the world and make their own mistakes and guide themselves through it. And it's an intractable dilemma in the sense there's no simple solutions. It's completely fluid. And if I've erred on one side, I've been that chillax daddy-o. So the downside is my kids might not have realized all the potential that they might have. The plus side of it is they've been unstressed, they've discovered it themselves, and when they are ready, they make the decisions, and they're decisions that stick, that last, and I think have transformative impact.
Yeah, Spitz, I got to tell you,
I don't think there's an answer, but this is the issue in parenting.
I'm very, very hands off. Like, and I, just like you, like I'm the sort of, you know, let them loose kind of. I mean, I've got one kid, but even though she's 5, you know, what you're saying about your younger son, you know, like you're saying video games, Netflix, YouTube. So she has her iPad. It's important for her to know because, I mean, the future, she's going to do everything from get airline tickets to go to school and have her textbooks and everything on iPads and screens anyway. So it's good for her to know this. But during the pandemic, okay, I was working as a single dude. She was at times, I mean, she was in kindergarten. So she just had like 2 hours of online class a day. And the rest of the time, she was just on the screen. And, you know, and at least while I was working. And you know what happened? I think it was after a week of her doing that continuously that she just came and told me, she's like, I don't want to do it anymore. She's like, I do not want to, like exactly what Nikki did.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it anymore.
She's a girl, so she figured that out a decade faster than my kid because he's got testosterone fucking up his head. But it's good. Everyone at their own pace, right?
No, it's not that. It's because there is they do discover things about themselves. Like one of the things that she does is I grew up singing, that, and she's just naturally taken a liking to singing. So at one point, she was with the iPad for a while, and she just learned the entire, whole bunch of songs from Aladdin, and she was singing Speechless. Then she performed it at her birthday party last year. Got her voice in tune. She can use her chest voice, her head voice. She can go into falsetto. Like she's doing the whole thing, and it's So the thing is that and I kind of just let her on her own. Now, when I saw her really, really getting into it, then I started sitting down and teaching her things, and I started singing with her, and we started doing harmonies. And so I think that if they want to do it, they're going to find it despite the distraction. This is, I agree with the idea of letting them indulge. Now, if they, you have to keep an eye on it, but this brings us to like the next aspect of this I want to talk about, which is the gender differences. Okay, so we're gonna get totally politically incorrect here, or whatever. That's fine, but who cares? But so there are. What are the gender differences between? Okay, so we've got two things. I've got a girl. You've got two boys. So there's gender differences when it comes to kids and raising kids. So that's one topic. But in terms of men and women, dads and moms, how do they raise kids differently, and what's sort of similar about them? Do you think that this hands-off, laissez-faire thing is? I found it easier. So I'll tell you, when I was with my ex, and again, I only have a sample size of one having a baby mama, I guess, but there's when I was there was always it just felt more involved, right? And now when I'm on my own, I can kind of just do things my own way. I can just let things go the way that I do, and I find it really, really I actually find it a lot easier because parenting as a verb, I think it's a very recent invention. Like my dad never thought about parenting. Like it wasn't, they were just parents. They were just there.
Yeah.
Like the furniture, and they just told you what to do, and they hit you a couple of times and, told you shut the fuck up if they didn't like what you were doing. It was all about them. And you just went, you did all your shit that you had to do, and they just wouldn't care. And then it became like an active, an activity that you do. Like it's an actual thing that you do, parenting. It became and I just find it's I lost my train of thought here, but
yeah, gender. Yeah, do men inherently parent differently than females, than women? Yeah, that's I think what you're trying to get at.
That's what
I think a way to kind of answer that without triggering the shit out of everybody.
No, trigger
including
away.
Including it is there was a really funny video that was circulating on social for a while, and it was a professor who illustrated the ostensible difference between men and women. So men have boxes. Okay, there's the food box. There's the sex box, there's the parenting box, there's the sleep box. And with men, that's what? Food, sex, maybe work. There's
that's
a few
it.
other
That's
boxes.
it.
That's kind of it. That's it.
You're pushing it.
It's like a blowjob and a nap, and we're okay, right? So then, and then he walks over to a little mannequin of a female and likens it to like a beehive. Every part of a woman's brain is connected to every part. So there's this compartmentalization doesn't exist. So one feeling or one event will instantaneously trigger like a Christmas tree or a fireworks display all the others, which leads to the Venus-Mars kind of conflict and the inherent differences between men and women. Now, that said, I think a more productive conversation than to look at this as male-female gender bifurcation is let's call parents category 1, which is box parents, and category 2, beehive parents. So you've got alternative parents, you've got gay parents, you've got men who display characteristics which you would maybe assume stereotypically are female characteristics, and you have women who might parent like I do. So I think the best bet for kind of addressing this issue is to not look at it in terms of gender per se, but in terms of almost equally innate but personal behavioral characteristics. So you're either a box parent or a beehive parent. I'm a box parent. Okay. I happen to be a man, but there are boxes, right? There's the food box. There's the pizza box, which is stacked to the ceiling. There's the video game box. There's the fun box. There's the lightsaber box. And there's a few other boxes which are mostly fun.
Yeah, that's right.
and
I get
then
that,
there's
Spitz,
the beehive parent is like, oh my God, it's like we need to focus this child. We need to forever educate this child. We need to not only guide this child, but lead this child. We need to program the shit out of this child, and we need to plan every aspect of this child's existence because there are consequences to not doing that. And if I don't do that, then my child will never realize their full potential because I didn't give my children my all.
Yeah, and
there is two kinds of things.
I am gonna, but because I know you're saying that it's a characteristic, it's a box of the beehive, and it's not necessarily the gender. But we're talking in generalizations here, just to have the conversation, because we're talking about single dads versus single.
I think, like the video alleges, to your point, men tend to be boxy.
Right.
All right. So almost predominantly. And women,
not all. We know it's
hashtag
not all.
Not all. Largely, statistically, women are beehivey and men are boxy. And that's what made the video funny and what triggers the shit out of everyone in this age of, identity and gender and, kind of forced separate but equal equality. And we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think that there are innate characteristics. And I think, again, going down to the biological level, the mother is the emotional foundation for humans, like it or not. I think that's just an incontrovertible fact. And as a consequence of that dichotomy, you've got these inherent behavioral and procedural differences between how men and women parent. Right. I'm kind of trying to have my parenting cake and not non-binary kind of thing too. And again, I'm not trying to gloss over some of it, but I think that there's so much uncertainty and there's so much confusion about gender identity and sexual identity. And as it relates to parenting, especially in this age where I'm a huge advocate of alternative parenting. Gay parenting, 2 men, 2 women. There could be 3 parents. I don't care. As long as a child grows up in an environment of nurturing and support and love, who gives a shit what that structure is and what the people are? But,
I want to go back to what you were saying about the beehive thing where you're scheduling and hyper regimenting. There's and again, letting kids get bored. There's when Isaac Newton, Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein, probably two of the greatest geniuses that ever lived. Yeah. So, Isaac Newton, when he came up with the laws of motion, he came up with optics. He invented the whole field of physics.
Yeah, he wrote the Principia when he was chillaxing during the pandemic.
That's the thing.
My kids were video gaming. Isaac Newton was changing science.
He also came up with. He invented an entire branch of mathematics. He invented calculus.
During that time, the fluxions. He called them fluxions.
How did that happen? So it was, as you said, there was a pandemic, the bubonic plague. Yeah, and everybody was quarantined, but without Zoom and without iPhones, without iPads.
He's a little guy. He was like 5 feet nothing, probably weighed 90 pounds.
Right, and then this guy, he had fuck all to do. That's what I'm saying, Spitz.
I agree, man.
He didn't have it. He came up with all the shit when he had nothing to do.
The
Einstein was on a night shift, I think.
He was at the patent office. Patent office. He was bored too. Yeah.
Fuck all to do. He was doing nothing, and that's when he
except changing science. Yeah.
Special relativity, photoelectric effect for which he won the Nobel Prize. All this, all of this stuff happened when he was doing nothing. It's so important to be able to do nothing. And I mean, these are two obviously.
But it's also, Ali, there's another point to this. There's an opportunity, right, which is a pandemic, or, you know, Marquis de Sade wrote 120 Days of Sodom, which, by the way, is a masterpiece in jail, in the Bastille. Okay. And he admits that if he wouldn't have been in jail, he never would have been able to write it. And it's a hell of a book. Check it out. But there's a combination. They say that talent is, you know, aptitude and appetite. So, you know, circumstance can only go so far. So, and this goes back to the parenting thing. So you could schedule the shit out of your kid, and you could send him to Juilliard and, you know, have private lessons from Malcolm Gladwell, but the kid can grow up and work in McDonald's. Okay. It's like, it might have an impact, and hopefully it will, but it's got to come from inside. Right. Mm-hmm. And we talked earlier about, you know, Yngwie Malmsteen was 12 years old and he saw a beat up guitar leaned against a wall. The dude never had a guitar lesson and got kicked out of high school after driving a motorcycle down the hallway, and, you know, reinvented classical, you know, neoclassical rock guitar. Why? Because he had it within him. He needed to do it. You cannot create that spark. If the spark is already in your child, it is your duty, and I'll say it's your duty as a parent, to do everything you can to nurture it, to let it grow and thrive. But if the kid doesn't have it and doesn't give a shit, then you're wasting your time and the kid's time.
Yeah,
and part of it is identify what your kid really wants. It's got to come from inside. When my kid Vinny was 12 years old, I got so excited because when he was like 5, he was beating on pots and pans. I was, you know, streaming Napster. I was playing guitar, and like his favorite was Green Day, and he's like, he could play a 4/4 beat and play with me at age 5. Yeah. So when he turned 12, I was like, I'm going to activate this motherfucker. He's going to get all the chicks, and he's going to be a rocker, and we're going to start a band. So I went out to Guitar Center and I spent $1,200 and bought him a Yamaha kit, right? It's the electronic kit. So you put the headphones on, you don't disturb the neighbors. Yeah. It's got the pre-programmed track. You can sound like John Bonham or Neil Peart.
They're great. I mean,
they're awesome. It's like, it's for this kid. I thought it would change his life. I bought it for him. I go, Vinny, I've got the ultimate present for you. You're 12 years old. Can you here it is. Here it is. He did not give a shit. So then I'm grappling with this, and I'm like, should I force this kid to take drum lessons so that inner spark can come out? And to this day, I'm not quite sure, but I think I did okay, which I didn't, which is like, he just didn't care. And I reminded him. And here's the other funny thing that happened. I play, you know, guitar, and I write songs and shit. So I learned how to play drums. I went to YouTube and I taught myself drums. The drums are right back behind me here, and I still play them and I love it. So it was a present for me. My girlfriend laughs that I buy shit for my kids when I'm really just buying it for me. So maybe this is another example.
When Homer Simpson bought Marge Simpson a bowling ball, right?
So maybe this is all bullshit and I just bought this set for myself, which could be true. But honestly, I wanted to trigger what I thought was an innate creative spark in my own child, and it was a hashtag fail. So my question to myself and other parents is, to illustrate your point vividly, is, you know, should Mookie have forced Vinny to take drum lessons to kind of trigger that and get it going? Or did Mookie do the right thing and say, fuck it, the kid really doesn't give a shit and would rather play Call of Duty? I don't know. And this gets to the heart of what you're talking about.
Yeah, this does. And speaking of Call of Duty, so Priyank, and he's got another really fun comment coming up. So he's saying, I was retrospectively, well, he wrote Lucy, but I'm pretty sure you mean lucky, Priyank. Yeah. So he's like, I was retrospectively lucky to have grown up with Windows and console games, because those skills are helpful in the current economic climate and in terms of common bonding references in the office. Yeah. So you can in the office, you can talk about video games, and that's, I think that's okay. Like, Priyanka, I mean, if that's the kind of thing, but if you there is life beyond, you know, bonding in the office, right? I mean, I guess
Well, and now the pandemic shows that you don't even need to commute through fucking carbon monoxide for 4 hours a day just so you go from one damn computer to another damn computer, from
That you
one
can have
room
water cooler
to another.
conversations.
So at the water cooler, you can say, "How was your weekend?" Well, I know how your weekend was because I saw your shit on Facebook anyway. Right? I mean, it's absurd. So the silver lining of the pandemic is basically like electrifying the obvious, which is we're doing so much stuff stupid as a culture that maybe, you know, we'll learn a few things from this.
Yeah.
But to your point, and, you know, to her point, this kind of virtual world, like the digitization of our reality, is not all bad. I'm one of those outsiders who I'm very Pollyanna of this entire digital revolution. The Facebook testimony from the whistleblower is this week. Coincidentally, the outage happened. Everyone's freaking out again about how violative Facebook is. It is. I think it's an evil, shitty company. Should it be broken up and regulated? I'm not so sure, because that introduces its own complexities. But everyone is now, oh my God, our children are wrecked with these video games, with social media. They're not talking to each other, and we're raising an army of zombies.
But they are talking to each other.
I don't think so, though. I think that it's mostly positive. People are communicating more than ever before. There's a fluidity and an information flow on these devices in our pockets that's unprecedented. And the brain, you know, again, to her point, the neurons are firing in our heads like never before. It's like, it's new, it's disruptive. There's really, really awful shit with like genocide in Miramar because of Facebook. But again, there's a silver lining to this. And I think the teleological kind of trajectory of this digital revolution is mostly positive. And it's inevitable. It's also inevitable. So let's embrace it and let's get it right. But
well, I mean, that's what I was kind of getting into when I was saying, you know, in the future, my daughter, in the future, I mean, she's going to be doing all her classes and everything on screen. We saw that during the pandemic too. But there are a lot of positives to it. And I think it's, you know, that's where people get confused. They just think screen time. But it's screen is just a medium, right? I mean, what are you doing with it? I mean, you can say the same thing about books. Your kid could just sit and just read like supermarket romance novels, which are essentially not much different from porn, because they just create these unrealistic images of people.
Yeah, they're porn for Puritans, basically.
Yeah, porn for Puritans. So they could do that all day, or, you know, they could read books that they learn something from. And my daughter, when she was 2 years old, she's at daycare, and I picked her up, and she's one of her first best friend, right? Her name's Isabella. She came back, and they weren't talking to each other. They were just a little distant. And I sat her in the car, and I was like, "What's going on?" I was just, Zoe, what happened to, you know, you guys weren't talking to each other? And she turns around, this 2-year-old kid. She's like, "We had a quarrel." So I got really confused. I was like, you know, what's going on? What are they teaching this kid in daycare? You know, I was equally impressed and concerned. It turned out that she'd gotten that word from Peppa Pig. She got a lot of, because Peppa Pig speaks in, you know, British English, Queen's English, whatever.
Yeah.
And she's learning that. So it's a lot of the articulation, a lot of the language. As an only child, his parents both work, and you know, you didn't get a chance. Like there is that, and I just, you know, when books first came out, like a long time ago, way before you and I were born, about a decade or two before you and I were born. You know, when books first became the thing, all these sort of ancient philosophers were really upset about it. They said, "You want human beings."
Socrates hated writing. That's why Plato wrote the shit down, because he distrusted the written word. He said,
but why is that?
Because he felt it was disingenuous, and that the elenchus, or the dialogue, had to occur in real time with real people, because there was a sense of trust and honesty. Socrates felt that the written word was inherently deceptive and manipulative.
There was also another problem with it, is that they thought that this was the downfall that's going to make human beings dumber, because before they had to walk around with all this information in their heads. So that made them mentally really strong. But now that they could write all this stuff down, they didn't have to remember it. You know, like, you know, when you had to go into your exams and you had to fucking like know everything, like, and especially in medical school, I went to medical school, and you had to go and you had to memorize everything. You had to know. Now you don't, because you have access to resources where you can look that stuff up. So what you really need to do is know how to find relevant, focused information quickly, right? In the most expedient way and the most effective way. So so these are the kinds of skills. I mean, education itself, the way we learn, all of this stuff is changing. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that most of these things are inevitable, and people are just really scared of these mediums. I mean, I saw David Cronenberg, like the director, he once talked about. He went to this event and someone was talking to him about, how people are not interacting with each other because they're always looking at their phone. He's like, it's social media. They are interacting with each other, but they're doing it through the screen.
I agree 100%. The sheer volume of interactivity between human beings and the products of the human mind in terms of creativity and content is off the fucking charts. It's in zettabytes of data. So on the one hand, we can't talk to each other, and our kids are growing up in a vacuum and they don't know the basics of etiquette and they don't know anything about interacting with other human beings because they're on their thing. Yes, I think that's true. But at the same time, the sheer volume of information and access to information is off the charts. And I see that in my kids too. And the level of precociousness that they display in terms of knowledge of the world. And it's skewed, definitely. And there's a lot of biases and bullshit, especially online. There's bullying. There's all sorts of problems, right? There's conspiracy theories. My kid just this morning, Nikki, in the kitchen when, I'm giving him coffee and I'm sending him to school, right? Good dad, send kid to school with coffee, right? He's like, what's up with this flat earth stuff? I saw this guy on Joe Rogan and he was like head of the Flat Earth Society, Rogan, it's guy. Like, Mookie, like, does the, when the earth, does it really curve, when you look at the horizon, he's trying to figure it out. So I'm like, okay, here we go.
What kind of idiots go on Joe Rogan?
Yeah. So, thanks to Joe Rogan, where, people are anti-vax and now, flat earthers, but, so you're going to get a tsunami of bullshit, but you're also going to get a tsunami of opportunity, and you're going to get an even higher level of just engagement. Let's figure it out. And going back to parenting is, the same thing. I have not censored my kids' internet. Now, a lot of parents will be like, oh my God, that's it, Spitz. I could deal with the pizza boxes to the ceiling, and I could deal with your kind of like fun dad attitude. And I know that you're handling the consequences, but not censoring your kid on social media is like the end of, I don't know. Maybe it's again a bias because they're boys, but I've kind of let them do their thing. And thankfully there haven't been negative consequences, but I think that that's part of my own sensibility, which is let them discover things for themselves. And if there does seem to be a problem, then you bring the lightsaber out.
You can actually, you can guide them with this, because I got to say, because one of the things you said is opportunity. And after this, we'll move on to one more thing. And you've got a little bit of time.
I can keep going. We're just pressing the patience of our audience. That's all.
Yeah, whatever. Fuck the audience.
They can always unplug.
Oh, that's a great thing to say. Fuck the audience. Sorry, audience. Hey, but one of the things that about opportunity, right, is that I've already started talking to to my kid about this. Is that these phones, like I did when I was younger. We both did music, right? I had to go to. When we had to record something, want to record a song, a demo, we had to save up for it. We had to rehearse the shit out of it. We had to go into a studio. We had to book 8 hours of time. The 8 hours of time was the maximum we could afford. We had to get everything down, including the mixing and all that stuff. And it was just something that was a privilege kids could do. And that wasn't just a demo studio, right? If you wanted a professional, that was like, you had to get a deal and all that stuff. Now, in terms of creativity, okay, in terms of entrepreneurialism, this is a recording studio. This is a broadcastable quality recording studio. Right. It is a publishing company where you can write books, not just a publishing company, but a distribution company. With one click, you can distribute whatever you write, record all over the world.
Yeah, and as a consumer, I have access to an oeuvre which is absolutely incredible. Right. I've got every album from every band I've ever wanted. But that's and it's consuming. On a subscription, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about creativity. So you want to
they're dependent on each other, which is the one feeds off the other, which is universal, instantaneous, and ubiquitous access to a limitless, scalable volume of stuff.
Entire lectures from Harvard and MIT professors
Yeah, yeah.
on quantum physics
I think Musk just said,
courses.
don't go to college, just,
Go learn
Google,
everything yourself. But here's
Google
the
it.
problem. Here's the problem. There's some kids who will do that,
Yeah,
right? Like I told you,
right,
my kid wanted to sing and she took the same screen time. I didn't guide her with anything. She just picked up on this stuff
right.
and she started doing that because that's something that appealed to her. There's a lot of kids who are just going to sit there and just watch stuff all day and turn into zombies. There are other kids who are going to look at this and say, hey, you know what? I can
let me change the world.
I want to make movies rather than watch movies all day. I want to make them.
Right.
So here I've got like a 4K movie studio. So I'm going to start making videos with my iPhone or with this what technology they have. So it is not. There's we talk about economic opportunity and the economic how there's economic inequality and that gap is getting wider. But when it comes to opportunities, like the kind of kids in Senegal and Burkina Faso who have smartphones have the kinds of opportunities that only privileged kids who lived in rich neighborhoods had, in terms of.
I mean, wasn't Cardi B a stripper?
Yeah, all of them. Justin Bieber, he made it from. I mean, he was just a couple of hours north of where I'm sitting. I mean, he was in Stratford, right, this little town, and then he made YouTube videos as an 11 or 12-year-old, and he was discovered by I think Usher or something like that. I mean, this is how things are happening now, and I think that makes.
I think it's awesome, and then this full circle back to parenting, which is set your kids loose. Put some guardrails and be careful and watch them. But the downside of being the super planner and the helicopter is you seem to be so damn sure as to what's best for your own kids. And you're applying a standard that's outside of them. And there's an opportunity, thanks to even this digital reality of access to so much content, so much creativity, the DIY revolution that digitization affords, that we live in an era where if you want it, you can get it. And as a parent, how can we best serve our children? How could we enable them to be all that they can be? By providing them a prescriptive roadmap as to what they could and should do and forcing them into compliance? Or do we really set them loose, try to keep them safe, but really let them go to discover their own capabilities and their own experiences for themselves? And that's an open question. There is no answer to it. And it's obviously a balancing act between these two extremes. But because of everything that you're saying, Ali, we live in a time right now of extreme disruption and insecurity, but also unprecedented opportunity. And that could and should redefine parenting. We got helicopter parenting is like communism.
So, yeah, I was muted. So I was going to say single dads are kind of on the rise right now. It's happening more and more. There are more people. I mean, there was how court systems tended to favor the mother, the kid staying with the mother. Yeah. But as I think the good thing is, thanks to gender equality and thanks to, just more egalitarian, I guess, a better system and more equality between the sexes, there are more women who are as unfit mothers, just like there were a lot of men who were unfit fathers. So
yeah, the deadbeat dad.
Yeah, now there's like there's a lot of deadbeat moms, right? So it is happening, and then more and more people. I meet more and more men who are actually getting full custody of their children in court battles, at least here in Ontario, and I think it's happening. Increasingly across, and a lot of these issues, a lot of these court biases against men have been highlighted.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I know in England it's been a huge deal too. Yeah. It's like women de facto get custody, even when there are instances of abuse and drugs and what have you. So it's different country to country, but it's weird. In parts of Asia, the man automatically gets the kids
Yeah, well,
as
that's
a
true.
breadwinner. Yeah. So
Yeah, like in places like Pakistan and India, I mean,
yeah.
he's a breadwinner, so he's like, okay, he's gonna
Yeah,
get the kids, his
he's got
family.
to get the kids because he can, take care of them. So
Yeah,
it's messed up, it's complicated, and then one thing that we haven't really talked about is the whole institution of marriage,
yeah,
because the dissolution of this foundational construct, right, precipitates single moms and dads.
yeah.
So we
Ooh,
can look
I
at
gotta highlight this comment right now. Where Priyank said earlier when you were talking about the gender differences, he's like Mookie, Jordan Peterson, Spitz.
Oh no!
You might, I know, you
Yeah.
might look at that as an insult, but I gotta say
Yeah.
one thing. Jordan Peterson, I've never been a fan. I've been like poked at him for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Right? Now he's his politics are insane, but whenever he's talking about as a clinical psychologist and his insights into human psychology, whenever he talks about that, it is really, really insightful. So I actually think that he's
No, I don't mind being likened to celebrity pundits. It's okay.
Well, especially when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, as long as it's not Mookie Alex Jones Spitz, I'm okay.
Flat Earth. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead. So you were saying
with what now?
Well, we didn't say it was Jordan Peterson. There was yeah, we were talking about this.
No, I was going on about parenting and then related to marriage and then the dysfunction of the institution of marriage, right. The conception of the nuclear family as archetypal, and the huge swirling controversy and conflict now about the innate versus acquired nature of gender, sexuality, behavior, and our role in society. So right now it's a big, steamy turd of a mess. Depending on who you listen to, everyone's getting triggered. No one's listening to anyone else, and it's highly politically polarized. So within this mess of that dialogue, when you shake the raisin bran and the little guys run down, what pops out of it? And at the end of the day, I think what gets lost in this mix is loving your children. And I know that sounds cliche, but everyone keeps going on and on with this blame game of who could or should be doing what, and all this prescriptive methodology and philosophy around what constitutes good parenting. And I think what gets lost in all of this swirl is focus on the kid. Mm-hmm. It's too often, I lived in Long Island for a while, and the soccer parents on the sidelines, in getting themselves into a rage over a play and then chastising their kids and feeling that if their kid didn't excel playing soccer, or if the team didn't make it to nationals, that it was a generational travesty, right? And projecting that sense of obligation and expectation and implicitly insecurity and failure on our kid is really, I think, the number one problem of parenting. And the flip side of that is, if you really love your kid, if you really care about them, if you take the time to actually listen and pay attention to their needs and not your own, that's going to solve 90% of all of your problems. And it's ultimately going to help you decide the course of action in the moment and in the bigger picture of what you're trying to do in terms of really being the best parent you can. I think my number one takeaway as a single dad and knowing and loving my kids, whenever I fucked this up, it was for selfish reasons. And thankfully, I don't think I did that too often. And I think if I've erred on the side of really giving them the benefit of the doubt, giving them the freedom they need to not only succeed, but to fail, and letting things play out with a minimal level of interference. And again, maybe they're missing opportunities that they otherwise would have been forced into to their benefit. Maybe they have untapped potential because of this attitude. But I think overall, they've grown up in an environment devoid of tension, an environment that's been pleasurable and fun. And they're entering adulthood, hopefully, I think, with a foundation that their daddy-o was there for them, loved them, and most importantly, let them discover things for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would kind of add one thing there is that whenever you hear those nurses in the ICU or physicians in the ICU, and they write all these books about what's important to people when they're dying. What do they talk about? What are their regrets, and what are their they they talk about how their relationships. They don't talk about their fucking investments accounts or anything like that. They don't talk about how successful their careers were, how many trophies they won. They talk about how they should have spent more time talking to their friends or staying in touch with their friends or spent more time talking to their daughter. And the things that they're happy about is also about these relationships. And just generally, when you talk about happiness, like people, when they're happy in life, it has to do with human relationships. And the most important thing, I think you can give your kid, well, at least for me, the number one priority is just to optimize that. Like, give her whatever tools she needs to make sure that her relationships are that they're strong, right? That they're enduring, and how to have the skills to do them, because these are different. It's hard to maintain relationships. It's getting harder and harder, and they don't teach this stuff in schools. Like, they should in schools, they need to teach people how to maintain relationships, and about taxes. They don't teach about taxes in school. It's crazy. But anyway, that's another topic. So, and one of the most important things when it comes to relationships is impulse control. And that doesn't mean holding back or pushing down your emotions. It's about how to express them and where. The way that you're gonna if you're watching a movie at home, you could bawl your eyes out into your ice cream tub or whatever the fuck you're doing, and that's fine. When you're in a movie theater, you're gonna feel the same emotion, but you're gonna express it differently. You might also get teary-eyed, but you're not gonna cry loudly in the middle of a movie theater. So those kinds of things, how to control your impulses, that has a lot to do with relationships. Communication has a lot to do with relationships, and maintaining them. And what, to quote Jordan Peterson again, one thing he said was, now that we're going there, is why do wealthy people, why do sort of privileged people tend to put their kids into liberal arts programs? Is because they know that the most important thing, they'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars giving them a liberal arts education, because they know that communicating, being able to speak with people, connect with people in a productive way, an efficient way, is key to forming relationships. And ultimately, that is what makes people happy. So I think that more than academic achievement, more than, like as Elon Musk says, you want to learn anything, you can learn it. You can't, like when we were growing up, I had to do medicine because it's like you got to be financially secure. If you do something else, if you're a struggling artist and you're going to be broke the rest of your life, you're not going to have a family, you're not going to have anything. But now, with the internet, with social media, you can monetize your passion. You can do whatever you want to, and you can really make money at it. I don't think that that's as big a deal as it used to be before. So it really comes down to connection. It comes down to relationships, and how, what you can do to really make your kids not just happy, because, you can do coke and be happy, but how to give them a sense of fulfillment and contentment in a way that they themselves have been able to maximize the potential that they care about. Not something about it's not about your own thing.
Yeah. My fondest memories are devoid of the major milestone events that you would usually associate with happy parenting memories. The graduations, the moments when either of my kids excelled at something, or won an award, or displayed competence or superiority doing something. My fondest memories are, Nikki sitting on my lap and Vinny at my side, watching a movie, ordering pizza, running around, tossing a football, doing goofy shit. These are the big memories that I cherish and will always cherish. And as I get older and they mature, I'm certainly looking forward to them to be self-actualized, successful trailblazers in society. Right on. But at the same time, I just hope they keep in touch and give me a call, give their old man a buzz, come visit, show off their partners, maybe even spawn a couple grandkids that I could play Lego with. I mean, these things are the real reasons we're here. And as a society, we're conditioned into this manic success consumption vicious cycle, right? Make a lot of money, spend a lot of money, and your value and worth as a human being is how well you do these things. And unfortunately, that's not real joy. And especially vis-a-vis your own children, having super successful kids is important. But what about loving your kids? And what about having fun with your kids? And what about feeling good with your kids? And if you run the numbers and you look back as you raise them, if most of your damn time as a parent was disciplining them, planning their events, and trying to force them to be all that they can be, how much of that experience was lost in terms of just chilling out, relating to them just as you discussed, and really sharing the joy and love that only a parent and child could experience. And that's the real tragedy of a lot of this, is that we're putting the expectations of society on ourselves, and we're projecting that same disconcerting and destructive bias on our own kids.
Yeah,
We're spawning consumers, not loving humans that we enjoy being around, and every once in a while see as a projection, not of our shitty qualities, but maybe perchance some of our good ones. And wouldn't that be a nice thing? Isn't that a great standard for parenting at the end of the day?
And it's not just kids, Spitz. I mean, if you ask, you talk to millionaires and you ask them, what was your, or whatever, you ask them, what's the fondest time in your life? What's the most nostalgic about?
Right.
They're like, oh, college. Best time of your life is college, and it doesn't get better, because they remember the experience. They were broke. They were in a shitty dorm.
They're eating ramen. I was eating ramen.
Borrowing money from friends, not paying them back.
And I got the clap.
The clap? Really? And there was a and
I'm not speaking from personal experience.
My niece, when I ask her about her birthdays, and she got, she's okay, I'm not going to call her a spoiled rich kid. She's really sweet, but she's gotten like really, really nice gifts and had those huge birthday parties, the backyard, the fucking like blow up castle and all that stuff, which I'm totally against. But anyway, she's had those things. And I asked her which birthday present was the most memorable and which one. And she's forgotten all of her presents. Right? She's 15. She forgot all of the really expensive, nice things that people got her. She remembers this one time when me and like part of the time took her and her sister to this place where they could, you had those ceramic pots. They did a little pottery. They painted it. They saved those things. It was the experience. Like what people remember are experiences. You don't remember the gift you got, the car you got, and all that stuff. Once you have it after a few days, it's a memory. You remember the vacations you took. You remember the experiences.
Yeah. There's that great photo of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Buffett's HQ is in Oklahoma, right? It's like the little Hobunk thing where he runs his holding company with trillions in equity, and Gates and him are buddies. So there's a great shot of them at the local diner, and they're sipping on a milkshake together, right? And I guess that's a cliche, but it's kind of true. You got these dudes with such epic net worth, and the most simple joy that any two people pretty much on the planet can enjoy is foundational, and it resonates. And maybe when the two of them drop dead in their top 10 memories, it's having that milkshake, and it's not moving and shaking, the economies of the world. Yeah. End of the day, we're all people, right? We're all wired. How many steaks can you eat? How many cars can you drive? It's whom do you love, right? And how do you love them? And if there's any definition whatsoever of unconditional love, that's between a parent and a child.
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
try not to fuck it up. You know what I mean? With all the horse shit that you've been shoveled your whole damn life. If there's any sense of purity and if there's any opportunity to make a connection with another human that's unbiased and devoid of all the bullshit that we've been fed our whole lives, that's with our own kids. And, you know, you got a chance every damn day, have a conversation, ask them how they're doing, listen, and stop telling them what to do all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna wrap this up now. Is there anything else that you want to say, or you're good?
Thanks for the opportunity to doing this. We've had a lot of political discussions, you know, the contentious American elections, the polarization. That's been a lot of fun. I hope we can continue some of these more humanistic and personal ones because, you know, it elicits a lot of feeling. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to share insights with
that's
an
kind of where
audience,
I'm
with
going
an
with.
audience that's into this kind of stuff. And
This is kind of where I'm going with this. And we've got,
Yeah.
like I told you, like Brian Earp is coming soon. He's going to talk about his book on love drugs and how that enhances relationships and helps you break up with people too, like all kinds of stuff. It's going to be interesting. That's going to be a really interesting conversation. So yeah, there's a lot of, he's talking about you. I'm pretty sure he's definitely not talking about me. I know this guy. He's saying,
he's talking about
this guy.
The ERP.
right. He's talking about the ERP. Thank you, Mookie. And then he also, as an afterthought, thank you, Abdullah and Ali. He's saying you are a lovely dad and you've done just fine, I'm sure. Elena is here. She was like the guest in the last podcast. So again, the link conversation with Elena, the 10 essential tips for newly divorced dads, which was excellent.
Yeah, I'm curious of her take too on our discussion, and you know, both of us, you know, I'm speaking for you, Ali, welcome other opinions and dissent, and I'm sure many things we said probably triggered people, but that's good. It's not bad. This is not a safe place. This is a place where adult human beings express opinions and aren't afraid to, you know, defend them in a robust exchange of dialogue. So let's have a conversation, for fuck's sakes, instead of like always being on defense or trying to screw somebody over who's got a different political affiliation.
We need a safe space from safe spaces.
Exactly.
That's what the title of this whole thing should be. Lena saying yes, it's the small memories that count. She's also saying there's a quote from Martin Buber.
Martin Buber. Yeah, he's a fellow Hebrew. Yeah.
Oh yeah. When we encounter another individual truly as a person, not as an object for use, we become fully human.
Yeah, especially with our kids. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like, give yourself and your children a break. You know.
Yeah. All right, guys. So again, I'm doing this every week now. So
all right. Thanks so much. I want to thank you, Ali, for inviting me, and welcome feedback. And let's continue the conversation. And I'm eager to see what other much more capable people feel about this important subject.
I think it was great. Hey, I've always told everybody, like, you are my kind of my parenting guru. It used to be Louis C.K., but clearly that's not possible anymore. But and that one thing that you told me, I think at the time when I was going through my separations, you said that kids mirror your adults. So whatever you're going through, if you keep if you show that you have your shit together, the kids will feel confident. If you show that you don't have it together, they're going to feel unstable too. So I think that's probably one of the most useful things.
I appreciate that. I'm glad I helped. And I'll just add that the important thing to show them is that you love them. You know, tell them you love them, show that you love them, and do loving things. And then as a parent, I just like end with this idea: if there's any golden standard, any yardstick to determine the efficacy or safety of your recommendation as a parent, is it an expression of your love for them, or is it a consequence of your own agenda? And then you'll get an answer, and act based on love and not based on what you think you should be doing because you're compensating for something else that got fucked up in your own childhood.
Yeah.
So we could have a whole episode on just talking about our parents, right?
Yeah,
Which is
maybe we will.
All right.
Any excuse.
Yeah, I've got
out,
endless stories there for sure. But thank you again. Thanks to the audience for bearing with us and listening, and then send your comments, and to be continued.
Yeah. So this is going to be, again, please take a second to, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and like this video. If you like it, it actually shows up higher in searches. If you're hearing this on a podcast app, and it's going to be on Apple Podcasts, Google Pod, all the other ones, then please give us a rating. It'll do the same thing. And otherwise, if you like what you hear here, share it and subscribe. And we're going to have more episodes like this. And I'm kind of going down a different direction with this podcast from here onwards. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Spitz, again. We're going to go.
My pleasure. I really enjoy doing this. And
be best. Hashtag be best.
Be best.
Call Melania Trump.
Right,
be best. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Hang on there for a little bit. All right.